Hi everybody, Cotton Candy TA here, founder and CEO of Chart Raiders, bringing a new series to you called State of the Game. Now, State of the Game features behind the scenes, looks at development, what it looks like to run this company as a CEO for Chart Raiders, everything that we're working on in the future, and some of the software and challenges we face in releasing such a massive platform. Now, if you don't know what Chart Raiders is, you can go to our other YouTube page, YouTube at Chart Raiders, and a quick overview of Chart Raiders right now would be that it is a gamified day trading platform where we are taking a different approach to what day trading is going to look like in the future. The current model of trading on exchanges is archaic and it's about to die, and we are taking a stance and a stab at creating what looks like the future of day trading. Now, there has never been a project or platform out there that has tried to gamify day trading. So for the past 4 years, I have done my best to create the vision of the future for day trading, and that's what Chart Raiders is. Now, with that said, let's get to the very first State of the Game episode where we are going to look at the development cycle this year so far and some of the things we're working on right now. All right, because this is the very first State of the Game that we are doing, we are going to have to play catch up, and I'm just going to say, let's do like 6 months of catch up. We, of course, have been developing this for multiple years now, but I think just kind of going through the last 6 months makes sense here. And I think it'll catch everybody up into a good point where you can see, hey, this is what Chart Raiders is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just bring up the very first set of meeting minutes from our development team. So just to give people an idea, our development team has about 20 people on it. And we talk about everything from the architecture of the software, like high-level architecture discussions, everything from KYC, how the software is going to operate, just a whole, like absolutely everything that goes on in the developer's cycle. And going back to it, the very first thing we had to tackle with this project was kind of creating an architecture for this project, an architecture that makes sense, something where we had to think about how people could take advantage of this software. So from a security standpoint, an anti-hacking and cheating standpoint, you know, one of the big parts of this project and things that people wouldn't realize playing any video game or creating anything. And when you play a regular video game, that's fine. You have game engines, and there are anti-cheat systems tied to that have been developed by multiple companies with numerous anti-cheat measures. And it's very simple. With a video game, the stakes aren't as high as something like Chart Raiders. With Chart Raiders, we deal with real money from real people, and we have competitions that people enter where their payouts are reflected at the end of the match. So if you entered a match with $10, you traded for 1 hour and you left that match with first place with $310. That's a great return, by the way. That's incredible. You would want to make sure that that's fair and just with every single player. You wouldn't want people cheating or any kind of advantages or anything like that. So, you know, a big part of what we do with Chart Raiders is making sure we have anti-cheat measures in place, and not just anti-cheat measures, but making sure that it's due and just and fair, and that we have a huge undertaking of how do we actually stop people from taking advantages, everything from false positives to cheating to altering system files, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really interesting when you get into it, because we spent months and months and months on architectural diagrams for this exact reason. Is how do you create anti-cheat on a project that's so big? Well, without getting into the details, to give people more ammunition as to where they would start looking to dig to try to find exploits, which I don't think they can, because I feel like we have a pretty bulletproof system. We go through this huge set of architectural designs, and at every step of the way, what can be done to prevent this? So that was a huge part of the project milestones back earlier in 2024, was just straight up, here's the architectural design and diagrams of the way the logic flows, how the information gets from server side to client side, and how that information travels when you have either a client who's put an input into the system. Where does that go? How does that affect the game? Where does the game engine read that? And so forth and so forth. So that was a big part of our development all year. And it's something we still tackle every single day. On top of that, we created system tools so that we can have live game masters actually monitoring and watching games to flag things that they may find that may be inappropriate. That's also back-ended by a huge system that has flags that get called out all along the way. So if there's kind of an anomaly in a match, now not only do we have the anti-cheat measures to make sure these anomalies can't happen, because everything is handled server side. We have no peer-to-peer connections in our software because that's one big point of exploitation. So then I said nothing is peer-to-peer, everything is server-side connection. So everything reads server-side for us. The downfall to doing something like this is it increases costs like crazy, because all the information and data is constantly traveling back and forth through server-side, which also now floods into how do you deal with netcode to make sure your service is snappy, quick, responsive, right? So then you have kind of these multiple layers of interaction, because you want to do anti-cheat properly. Well, it's all server side. Well, now you have to travel the data fast enough. So now you have to account for the architecture of that. And using something like gRPC is what we settled on for our architecture, and traveling the netcode and making things faster. Downfall is it up the cost a lot, because you could just say, well, just go with a simple netcode structure that makes sense. But because everything is server side, we need to not only have these inputs and outputs reach the clients from server to client side in lightning speeds, that ups development time. So we use gRPC technologies to make sure that we have that handled, and you still get that lightning fast response. So the video game feels like a video game. An order on Bitcoin is not 1 second behind the actual price. It's actually mirrored identically to the millisecond, right? Things like that. So then we might not quite be to the millisecond, but it's very close. And so then you look at that server-side connection and you say, okay, well, now we have netcode to worry about. So we bit the bullet. We developed all the architecture for netcode under a special protocol, and that just drove up costs. And we bear the burden of that cost to ensure that the quality is there for our audience, because easily you can get into a development cycle where you're just saying, hey, look, this is much cheaper. It's not going to cost us as much money. The company could make 50% more profits every year, but the trade-off comes at the user experience. So I'm of the standpoint that this has got to be taken seriously, because this could change the industry. And these are the kind of things that'll change the industry: taking it seriously, paying extra for the development of something like gRPC. Because when you look at development hours, you have to say, you have to go through the list of the project at the very beginning and say, okay, what makes sense here to hit our deadlines? How many hours is implementing gRPC going to take over implementing a simple form of netcode, like netcode form 2 or whatever form of netcode you may want to implement? And you say, well, gRPC is going to cost this much more, and it's going to delay these timelines more. And you just say, okay, well, yeah, you know what? Well, and also, by the way, it's going to increase your data cost by X amount. So you take all of these equations and you're left with hard decisions, especially me as the CEO of the company, because as the founder, I never wanted to take outside money to create this project. So for the past 3 to 4 years, I've actually been funding this out of my own pocket, which is it's heavy, man. It's heavy. You're talking about having 20 employees for 4 years. That's 20 to 30, sometimes 30, sometimes 20, sometimes as low as 15. But these are people who are full-time working, 4, 5, 6, 7 days a week sometimes on your project. So then you're sitting there saying, I'll let everybody do their own calculation, but how much does a software engineer cost? Okay, well, we have 8 or 9 of those. So how much do they cost per week? Times that per week by 52 per year, and then times that by 4. So now you have, and that's just our engineers. We have audio people, we have people in video editing, we have people in finance, we have people dealing with government, we have lawyers or legal team. The legal is expensive. I'm going to tell you that right now. The legal is very expensive. Add 6 or 7 employees just for the legal part. So take your software engineers and times that by 6 or 7, you got your legal bills. So you start developing this product, and it's been 4 years now. And I look back and I kind of want to just pull my hair out a little bit. I got a braid in right now. I probably, if I thought about it too much, I'd probably be bald, and I wouldn't have the means to keep my hair nice and healthy to have these kind of braids. If I thought about this, how much money I've spent on chart readers too much, I would probably not have the hair that I do. So let's just put it at that. And then, so all of these decisions you make, just to give everybody kind of an insight. And this is just one of many decisions. This is one of 50 different points of contention that you would go and say, okay, well, we have to, increase costs here, reduce costs there. It's all, and then who pays for that, right? Do you have investors? Well, I never wanted to take investors because I don't want to have anybody to answer to. You operate with the typical exchanges in the space of day trading exchanges, and they all have investors. So what that looks like is, I'm going to build out an example here of how exchanges work. Okay, so exchanges have 2 ways they operate in funding. Okay, so you're using Binance or BitGet or Mexi or whatever. Anyways, so you have a liquidity pool. Okay, so you're going and doing 100x trading. You have a liquidity pool, right? And that has to be provided for the exchange to be able to operate. And the liquidity pool means they have to have an investor go and put, say, $10 or $20 million into a fund, so that you can have proof of funds so that you can operate on your exchange. Because if there's a influx of volume and people want to withdraw their funds, you can't just tell them, well, you got to wait because, I don't have the money today. You got to be able to provide that liquidity for everybody. So you need about 10 or $20 million in a pool. And sometimes the bigger the exchange, you need 30 million, 40, 50 million, 100 million sometimes. Like, your liquidity pool funds and your proof of funding, and every exchange has it. So first thing you do is you get an investor. So you're building an exchange. Let's pretend for a second, we'll call you Johnny. You're Johnny. Johnny, you want to make an exchange. You're like, okay, well, I can build it, but I need the money for it. So now I need an investor. So Johnny gets an investor, you get an investor, and they'll put $10 million or $20 million into your liquidity pool. So now all of a sudden you have a liquidity pool. Great. That investor is like, okay, cool, but how am I going to make the money? Where does my return come from on it? This is high risk business. You're in crypto, you're in exchange, you guys get shut down all the time. Where does that risk factor come back for me in my investment? Because I'm not giving you $10 million as a favor. I want to make money on that. So then what happens is they have a liquidation rate, I would say like 60% or 65% or 58%, somewhere in between 58 and 65%, you're going to get liquidated. So that every time you get liquidated, that money doesn't go to the exchange. It actually goes to the investor who floated that pool. So that investment money, when you get liquidated, an investor is making money. Now it's always going to be 60% because investors know that this is how it operates. So say you had an exchange, you wanted to create an exchange. And Johnny, you said, well, I'm going to be better than the exchange. I'm going to get more of an audience because I'm going to do 70% liquidation. Come trade on my exchange because it's so much better. It's you get 70% liquidation, and you get more for your money on Johnny's exchange, johnnytrading.com, right? So johnnytrading.com. But the investor says, why did I give my money to you when every other exchange out there is desperate for investors? And they're all giving me 60%, so I make 40%. Or actually, sorry, the liquidations happen at 60%. So like you're going to get more liquidations. I get more money on my investment. Why would I go and take only 30% liquidation rate so you can have a better, benefit? There's tons of exchanges out there. They all need liquidity pool investors. So then that creates kind of a stigma in the industry where everybody has the same rate. Because if you're going to ask for an investor to make a liquidity pool for you, you're the investor. Let's swap it for a second. Johnny is now the investor instead of the exchange owner. And you're like, well, I want people to get liquidated at 60%, not 70, because that means I make more money. So why the hell would I give you that when everybody else is saying 60%? So that's problem number one. And that's the way one way that they're, and then exchanges are incentivized, obviously, in many forms, which I won't talk about to make sure people are liquidated. I won't discuss that, cross versus isolated. There's a whole bunch of ways. I don't want to get into like that kind of content here. The second way that they make their money is in the fees. So you get double smashed as the user. Not only do you get smoked on liquidity because you're 60%, you're liquidated on 100% ratio on 100x trading, or 25x trading, or 5x, or whatever. It doesn't matter. When you get liquidated on your account, guess who makes the money? The investor. Then you pay your fees on your trades, and that's where the exchange makes their money. They make their money on the fees. The investor makes their money on the liquidation, right? So like that's the problem. And so like I recognized that this was a dying industry a long time ago, even before I started really developing chart raters, even going back 5-6 years ago. I looked at this industry and I said, there's no way this is sustainable. Like you're talking about, you're stealing money from kids like it's candy. Like it's not a sustainable business model. This will change one day. How do we change that? So I created chart raters. We have a true 1-to-1 liquidation ratio, which means if you're trading 100x, which we only do 100x on chart raters, if you're trading 100x, you get liquidated at a full 100%. You don't get liquidated at 60%. You don't get liquidated at 70, 80. If you're in a trade, it goes negative 99%, but then bounces up. Hey, guess what? You're still in that trade with your full amount. And this was important to me because I never wanted investors to come in and to kind of flaw my vision. So I've had to backbone this project for 4 years. So that's part of like being a CEO and the business mindset, and the advantage it's given me to running chart raters is that I never had to take any investment money, because of when I need to pay for salaries for employees, things like that, I simply just go trade. And then it's taken a massive amount of trading to raise that money. You're talking about 3 to 4 years of development for between 20 and 30 people. Do the math. Like you're talking about millions of dollars. Like it's cost a lot to get here, and you're legal and this and that. So like this is one of the benefits of chart raters. As a CEO, I've been able to keep grasp as 100% controlling entity with no investment money, not a single penny ever coming into this thing. And I've been able to keep that, my claws tightly gripped around the throat of chart raters, which has been great because now I get to sit here and say, this is one of the problems we can face in the industry. And so then that kind of combines into the other parts where it's like, oh, now you have to decide how high quality is your project going to be, right? Like how high quality are these metrics that you're doing? Do you do something like gRPC, which costs way, a ton of more money in terms of initial upfront costs for development, because you want good netcode that's reliable, that makes it feel snappy and sharp like a video game. You hit buy, it buys instantly. Not only do you hit buy and it buys instantly, but you're trading. You don't want Bitcoin's price to be half a second off, because then people could watch Binance, see what it does, go make a trade. Like, you want to make sure things are like straight perfect. So like for me, gRPC was a must, and developing some of these Netcode technologies and working with them properly and developing the architecture to support that was a huge part of the beginning of our project. The other thing is we don't charge fees on our trade. You enter a match and you pay a fee to get into your match, which is 5% of your entry. So if you're entering a $10 match, you pay 50 cents to enter that match. You trade for an hour. That's the only thing we ask for in terms of, and that pays for costs and profits and company profits, and to make this thing viable and to grow and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you join a $100 match, we take our $5 fee. If you join a $1,000 match, we take a $50 fee. It's a 5% fee, and you trade for an hour, and then whoever wins the competition gets that prize pool, right? So for example, and I'm just going to use first place as an example here. Actually, it's the top six. It's first place to 66th place that gets paid. 65th, sorry, and then 66th to 100th do not get paid in that match. So say you enter a match, and I'm just going to use first place as an example, so people understand the structure of how kind of Chart Raiders works. You enter a match for $10. There's 100 players per match. You trade for an hour long, and then the person with the best results over an hour gets first place. The next place down gets second place, and they get their prize pool, third place, and so forth. So it's almost think of like a poker tournament in a way. First place, you enter a match for $10. You end up paying $10.50 to get into the match, because we need our 50-cent fee, pay for data, pay for company salaries, pay for profits, pay for company revenue, etc., pay for salaries. 100 people enter the match. The prize pool is $1,000. We don't take any of the prize pool. We distribute it all back to our participants. 31% is for first place. You enter the match with $10. There's 100 participants. That means the prize pool for that 1 hour long match is $1,000. First place will win $310. If you did the same thing, which is an insane return, by the way. Imagine taking $10, trading for an hour, getting first place, and you left with $310. That's incredible. Getting $20 would mean you 100x'd your account. $10 to $20 means you would have made 100% returns within 1 hour. That's incredible, by the way. Now let's talk about $310. That's an insane return. I think if I'm doing the math in my brain properly, after 1 hour, you have a 3,100% return on your money. It's not 310%. I think it's 3,100. Math people can correct me out there. I'm doing this on the spot. I'm not really interested in that exact breakdown, but just to show the power of how we've developed this. And we don't need to take any of that fee, because again, we don't have investors. We don't have trading fees. We just have an entry fee to the match. So you pay your 50 cents once an hour. That's it. Like, oh no, like who cares, right? But because I was able to develop all this on my own, I never had any input. I never had any shareholders, and I never had any investors saying, well, how do we make our money? No, I got to keep this thing as pure as possible and create a system that can survive forever and crush the rest of the industry, right? So that was important to me. Imagine you enter a match with $100. Hey, an hour later, you won first place. You just made yourself $3,100. What if you could do that 3 times a week, minus your entry ticket fees and all the second place finishes and, 15th place and 20th place. Like, let's just wash all the entry fees against second places and 10th places and 15th places. Let's just focus on, like, if you were to do this 3 times a week with $100, yeah, you'd make 10 grand a week. You'd be making $3,100 3 times a week. And I'm sure you're going to have a little bit up and down in there. And that's not important, because you might also end up more than that. What if you got 2 second places? Second place is 14%. So then you have an extra $1,400 per match, right? So then you have to negate your entry fees and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So like, we're not focusing too much on that, just like the power of compound, like the power of what Chart Raiders can give, because we don't charge fees, because we don't have liquidation pools like that. If you liquidate your account in a match, you simply just leave the match, you go to the next one, you lost $10 or $100, whatever your match ticket was. No big deal, right? Like, this is something we account for in our strategy when we're thinking about how to enter a match in Chart Raiders and how we play it out. And this rewards intellect and rewards planning and rewards strategy, right? Like, this was really important to create a system that is really for the users and less about how much money we can take. We have a bottom line that we need to make, and we do that off the entry fees and off cosmetics, like simple, just like Path of Exile. They have their cosmetics, and people buy their cosmetics because they like to support the product. We're much the same. We developed a kick-ass project. And if you want to buy cosmetics to swag out, do it. And that's how we get paid, or on the match entry fees. Like, that's fine. We don't need to gouge people and bleed them dry like vampires for fees on every single trade and liquidation pools. We don't give a shit about that. We just give that 100% of the money that goes into the prize pools gets redistributed 100% to, we're not 99.5%. We just take that little fee we charge at the beginning of the match. That's it. 100% gets distributed. That's it. I never wanted to have, because we had investors come in. We had one person come in who wanted to give us 12 million euros and had all these demands. Oh, you should do it like this. You should do it like this. I just said, no, like, this is not my vision. I don't care. There's many stories like that where we've had people come and try to inject money, but also have an opinion on how the way this thing should run. I'm not opposed to taking money, but what I am opposed to is people injecting their opinions into my project that I've spent 4 years developing with 30 other people. That's not happening. So anyways, a little bit of a CEO rant and like kind of an insight to what I kind of go through and deal with, to develop such a massive program and project here. And, it's really empowering when you get to call the shots and you get to make something made by day traders for day traders, made by a gamer for other gamers, made by a trader for other traders. This isn't made by a businessman to vampire everything you can, right? This is made by a gamer, by a trader, by somebody who loves their community, by somebody who doesn't fall to the victims of society and social pressures and etc. And somebody who has a strong voice and just won't bend on their own, somebody who believes most of the world is bubblegum dystopia. This is who the CEO of Chart Raiders is. So like, take your money elsewhere, investors, because this is not what we do here, right? Again, not opposed to investment money, but on my terms, not yours, because I don't need money. I can just go and trade for money and inject it into the project that way. Not to say it's not heavy and hasn't cost me a lot. I've put up everything I've ever had and owned to make sure Chart Raiders becomes a project for the future. Let's not pretend like I have an infinite pool of money either. I have a certain amount of money. When I need more money, I trade. And when I have to trade, I grind my ass off, and that's it. And that costs me time with my family. That costs me time in life. That gives me gray hairs. Like it all costs something. It costs pieces of your soul that you're never gonna get back. So I do that because I love my project, love my community. With that said, let's move on, because I wanted to give everybody a good understanding of what it looks like as a CEO making these decisions, what kind of the other things we face in the industry that people may not see, and why this is so important for day trading, because we are faced with the reality that day trading will cease to exist one day. Investing won't, banks will take over, but the idea of day trading has already been removed from us with these crypto exchanges taking everything they can and vampiring us for absolutely everything. So this is already something that is happening under people's noses, and it will get worse and worse until it is dead. So without a project like Chart Raiders, day trading truly dies as an industry, which is a catastrophic event. We cannot have that happen. So Chart Raiders comes, gamifies it, saves the day. Hopefully that's you cross your fingers after spending years of your life and millions of dollars and putting everything you own up online. Because if Chart Raiders fails, I fail. Like, that's as simple as that. There's no smoke and mirrors here. If Chart Raiders fails, I've put up everything. I've risked my YouTube career. I've stopped making content. My viewership has dropped off dramatically. The realities of me taking on Chart Raiders is just that. Like, I used to get 500,000, 200,000 views per video. I barely get 2,000 views a video now, because I just simply don't have the time to put out content, because I'm supporting the ecosystem of Chart Raiders. People forgot about Cotton Candy because for years I haven't been able to be there and developing things. I've basically would have to start from zero again if Chart Raiders fails. So let's not pretend like this comes at no cost to me, myself personally as well, because I made myself a phenomenon in the trading industry and then sacrificed all of that when I could have just monetized easily, had millions of audience members by making IRL content, etc. Gave that all up. So also let's be realistic about what it has cost me, because it's not infinite, and nothing is infinite in this life. But I stand strong and true to what I set out to do, and we'll see how it comes. In 2 months we're launching, so fingers crossed. Now, let's get into talking about some of the other things we have done over the last 6 months here. You understand the CEO perspective. Now let's talk about some of the other roles in the company, their perspective, what we've done. So going back to, let's say 6 months, we start talking about things like, do we have KYC? Do we not have KYC? Well, we want this thing to be legal all over the world. So we have KYC. KYC is not the enemy people paint it out to be. KYC is the enemy when you have ugly people using it. We use one of the best KYC companies in the world to secure everything for us. And this is to allow for compliance so that we can operate in the United States and we can operate globally. So that on day one, when we come out, we can hit the switch to operate everywhere in the world. And, we do get state licensing. We're in the process of applying for state licensing right now. That's a big, massive task legally, by the way, as well. But because we do support things like KYC, this allows us to go and lean into being able to say, hey, like, we can have these major partnerships with companies that will allow you to get paid directly to your bank account, for example. You don't have to go on and off ramp crypto. That's the hope anyways. We fight for these things, and we're not quite there yet, but we fight for these things. We fight for the ability to have worldwide processors where you can pay from your bank account to your credit card, and you can get paid the same way. So you don't have to go and get crypto, buy Bitcoin, bring Bitcoin to our service. And if we fail in that task, then that's what it will be. But at least we go and we have paid for and done all the development work to support things like KYC, to support things like geofencing, to have anti-cheat measures, to have all the things that legally we would need to have game masters watching 24/7, to have security protocols, to vet our employees, to have security training that they have to go through. We audit our employees every 3 months. So there's such a big ball, and we'll continue to talk about this. There's such a big ball of, like, if you want to be legal in the US, and this is why crypto exchanges don't do it, because it costs millions of dollars again to get this stuff set up properly. So we aim to be legal worldwide. We are working on it right now, and that's a part of why we do KYC. And what else did we do 6 months ago? We fleshed out all the architecture diagrams. We did design flows. We discussed processes and security, authentication, just massive bulks of everything from security to architecture. You keep moving on, and our next meeting with our development team, it was an overview of the entire design schematic and how it's supposed to operate, database schematics and what they look like. We have multiple databases. We designed something called Rade Engine to go along with chart raiders. So not only did we develop chart raiders, but we developed Rade Engine, kind of a program in tangent. And you think of an engine, think of like Unreal Engine, Unity Engine, think of what Blender would use, for example. You develop these gaming engines, and they are a massive undertaking. Like, we're talking about years of development to support the future of the industry. So we created what we call Rade Engine, and Rade Engine has been no different. We have built our charts from zero. We don't just use TradingView libraries to say, hey, here's our charts, they're mirrored on our screen. No, we built everything from scratch, and we created an engine because we have the ability to have gamified elements. We have the ability to have things look different than anybody's ever seen it before. We have animations on our charts. We have special features, things like trade delay, peak meter, things that you would need to almost build from scratch with your own engine to support. So we did that. And that was a big talking point, in the past 6 months, is what does that engine look like? How is it developed? How is it designed? What are the action items? Like, it's a massive task. What are the database schematics? Does it all make sense the way the logic flows from the time a user clicks one button? How does it get to our database? How does it come back to the user's screen? At what point does the Rade Engine interject? At what point do anti-cheat measures get scanned for? Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff there, right? Like, it's not a small task. As the weeks go on, we keep doing action item reviews, database schema modifications, source code artifacts, workflows, reports, resource sharing, bug reporting, gRPC, internal layer communications, APIs. How do those all work? Providing assets so that things can be seen. Like, there's a huge back and forth between the development team and everybody in the project, because now they say, okay, well, what does this look like? How does it function? You click buy, what happens? Does a button glow? Does it light up? Do you have like a cool animation when your candlestick hits a level? What does that look like in terms of sound effects? So we had to develop sound effects for everything. So we sat there with sound engineers, and I sat there with my sound engineer, and I said, okay, well, when you click buy, what does it sound like? When you get liquidated on a trade, what does that sound like? Here's the animation. So when you have prices coming down, it hits your stop loss. What does that look like on the screen? Where's the animation? Does the screen shake and you have cool effects coming out and things that you don't see in day trading right now? And that's part of gamifying day trading, is all these elements. And then what are the sound effects, and how does that, what technologies do you use to reproduce these animations properly? And it's like, whoa, it's just become so much. What are the, like, you're passing assets, you're doing sound effects, you're doing video editing, you're tying it all together. So you have, like, kind of the way it works is like this. I have an idea, design out the idea graphically. I send that to my video editor. My video editor makes a motion video out of what I told him to do. That motion video then gets sent back to me. I send it to the development team and say, this is what it needs to look like. Please make sure that when this happens, that. So then we go through a quality check. We discuss how we can make that happen from a code standpoint, while keeping security, while keeping performance high, while keeping netcode viable. And then it comes back to me with the clear. And then I go to my sound editor and say, okay, this is what it looks like. Here's what I want it to sound like. Then we tinker around there. We add sound effects. We watch how it goes, send it back to my video editor. He puts it all together in one source file. And then we have to export all the animation properties, all the sound properties. That way that once it's cleared, it can then go back to the development team. They can say, okay, this is how we have to animate it. This is what the animation properties look like. This is where we need to see it work. Now, this is what it looks like in the software. We have to make sure the sound's queuing at the right time. We have to make sure this isn't impacting performance. So even one simple animation just goes through so many hands, back and forth all the time, from development team to me, back to me. So I'm the center point, and it goes this way, back to me, that way, back to me, up to the devs, back to me, back to sound and video, back to me, back to them. And it just becomes this big thing. And you're literally doing this with everything. You want to click buy? Yep. That you want to click buy whatever, like set your trade. Yep. That process goes. Liquidations, peak meters, trends, levels, buys, exiting trades. Like, there's so many animations, it just becomes this big, massive undertaking. So that's been a big part of our development cycle. Like, that's been a huge part of it. And and then in between all this, you've still got the actual coding of the project. You have to make the functionality from a UI standpoint. Look, you're working with multiple resources to make sure, like we have multiple parts of chart raiders. We have our lobby, which is where you enter matches. We have our skill tree, which is where you train. We have chart doctor, which is where you go do your quizzes. And I'm working with a different set of developers for each one of these because they're all being developed in tandem. So then every week I get together with my development team, the CTO, the COO, because we have a CTO and a COO. We go through multiple rounds of just, hey, this is what we did this week. Does this make sense? Does that make sense? Like it hurts your brain after a while because you've developed this program, and I designed the entire thing by myself. Like I designed chart raiders from head to toe in Figma. The design of the entire thing took me years to do, and it was a massive undertaking. So then I have to be in all meetings because I'm like the lead designer on this thing. I'm not only the CEO, the financer, and the lead designer, but now I'm also one of the security auditors. Not because we can't, afford to do these things, but because I have such a deep grip into this project that I understand so many elements. Otherwise, I would just, use all my time playing catch up with other people. So thankfully, I have a pretty good mind for these things, and I have a big background in, computer sciences. I went to school for 11 years. Part of it computer sciences, part of it design work, part of it new media engineering, part of it media engineering, part of it networking engineering, part of it microcomputer systems technology. So like I have a big background in this stuff. So that's why I take on all this, right? And like lobby matchmaking. How do you have a single player? How do you have a team setup fall through? How do you have a squad of 4? So this becomes like another big part of it. So as time goes on, what do we work on next? We work on, drawing lines on the charts, and we work on making that visible so that you see on TradingView how you click a button to draw a level on a chart. Well, ours looks completely different because we're designing this for the future, modernizing it, right? Like how does that look? How does that come across? Where does it move? The research and design, the R&D on this project from every single aspect has been massive. So then we go through a bunch of R&D. You're going into May now. It's like a bunch of R&D. We're talking about chat systems. Like how do we create a chat system for the entire software between this user and that user with server injection, so you have no peer-to-peer connection. So then that becomes a thing. Like how do we create the chat system for the entire thing? How do we create our social system? Like we have a big social page that shows where people can connect with each other. So how do you have your friends list? How do you right-click whisper them? Can you invite them to matches? What does that look like? Just all these miscellaneous activities that you would have no idea of what it actually looks like, or the amount of thought and development and everything that goes into that. It's like, whoa, that's crazy. Like I'm looking through the list here. I'm gonna read a few of these off. Binance data and the API integration, color of the charts, how to add lines, shapes, and colors. And this was just 1 week of what was on the agenda. How to draw on the canvas horizontally and diagonally. Designing an overall structure for implementing all the shapes on the canvas. R&D on doing those in the starting structure, creating the UI of the solo start screen lobby. So this was 1 week of work, by the way. So I just want to go through one random week. I just picked this one. Fine. Detailed software architecture for backend and front end. Completing the CRUD system, entity models for the system. Miscellaneous activities ×2. Project plan with CM plan, WBS creation for lobby and match, more miscellaneous activities, display chart zoom levels, user selection from top of the bar, chart replays, clicking selections, point on charts in the past, authentication through API and sign up. How do we authenticate our users? Geofencing, adding freehand drawings, consolidating architecture, artifacts, and confluence for the structure confluence space. Project architecture and design overview, API make panels where admin and legacy panels, policy management document, legal documentation, legal admin panel, policy management documentation, software documentation, articles, legal articles, API functionality when handling on users at system level configuration, admin panel. Like this list goes on and on. Persist and restore zoom, database structure, animate current candles, dynamic chat UI components, structure Firebase chat, one-to-one, global chat, chat UI integration, Firebase containers, authentication KYC, authentication forget password, authentication sign-in, canvas shapes, canvas data shapes, deleting shapes. There's about 50 more items on this list. This is 1 week of work and what we do with all these different teams. So just to give people, so like imagine having to be pulled into each one of these things and to be, so like, sometimes every half an hour of a day, I'm being pulled to this meeting, to that meeting, to this meeting, to that meeting. So it's like, yeah, it gets a lot. Let's move on. What else have we done? Because again, remember, this is state of the game. We're catching people up on everything that's been done for the game to this date, so that when we do another state of the game in a month, we can look at the software and how it's developed since. Because the next state of the game, we're probably showing off the software and doing like a live demo of the software. Time goes on. We do more of this type of scrub work where we're constantly just fixing things, adding the same stuff we're talking about, weekly reports of all these things, restructuring the system architecture. Because the thing about a system architecture with a project like this is as you keep developing your architectural documents, they have to be accurate. So you have to constantly stay on top of your architectural documents to make sure there's no glitches in the software of any type. You're working with multiple databases. It becomes a big task, right? And moving on time here. At this point in May, we get our first executable package, right? We're starting to look at the starting to look at the actual software and what it all looks like and coming through, and that's just in May. And then we move on here, and what's next? Another whole list. I'm not going to read this whole list. I'm just going to read the key points. We go through resource sharing. We do demos of the current progress, key features to game flow. Next thing we look at here is implementation of the deployment. So we're building the launcher. So then we start building the launcher so that when people download the software, they have a launcher. It says, click here to install. This is what you need to do, et cetera, et cetera. So we start building the launcher at that point. Yeah. So then we start getting into the really nitty gritty stuff more recently, the pricing of the trade elixir and how it doesn't have dependencies. Trade elixir is like our trade potion in the Mac, the impact on the prize bag, the classes that we use in charters. So we have different classes, right? We have swing trader, scalp trader, position trader, and how those impact during the matches and the benefits and bonuses. They have the animations to be integrated, how those look like final forms of animations. Let's see what's next here. Admin backend code. We have a huge admin panel that we create. So at all points of the software, while it's running for users on one side, we have this big tool on the back end. So like what you won't see from a video game. So think of a video game like PUBG or Escape from Tarkov or Path of Exile. Like you play it as a user, right? Like you're just using the software as a user. But then on the back end at the studio where the game's actually running, they have a huge admin panel where they have access to all sorts of tools to monitor all users all the time. They're called admin panels. So they can see what items, what users are getting. They can verify, was this legitimately taken? Is there any flags that are being raised? Hey, this person has completed the game in under 5 minutes. They must be using a cheat. Let's watch the replay footage of how they could do that. They watch it, they audit it, they decide, hey, that was cheating. Let's ban this user. So we have very much the same thing. We have a huge admin panel that allows us to control everything from items, the effects the items give, the cost of things, when we introduce new cases in our ecosystem, when there's new chapters in our story, when there is new skill tree nodes, when we want to introduce a new match archetype. We have a huge admin panel where we have control, master control of the software in every way, where our game masters watch live matches, where we do things like look through spectator mode, everything, right? So this is a massive thing that we've been working on for the better part of a year, is our admin panel and how we have control on the back end of everything, which has been a huge undertaking, by the way, but it's very cool to see it all integrated, when you're talking about everything being integrated all at once. Quality assurance is another big part of this. We work with 2 devs for quality assurance, that every time there's a new framework update or any kind of tools are changed, we have quality assurance people on that, basically internal bug testers and internal quality testers, right? Like QA testers. We have 2 QA testers who are constantly looking at this thing all the time to make sure everything's being done properly, to make sure that the Rade Engine is being designed, everything's being designed for the Rade Engine properly. And that brings us kind of to the current part of where we're at, because this is just like, again, remember, this is kind of the development, piece. And then you have other things that we didn't even get to discuss, like background modules, icons, special items, case modules, things like share profile screen, integrations from different APIs, things like that. It becomes a huge overview of everything we do. And then on top of all that, we have a story that I've been writing for the past 2 years. We have soundtracks that I work hand in hand with the artist to create. We have content that gets recorded. We have the constant update of everything that needs to be done from a balance point and perspective. So, hey, this item's too strong. We need to tone that down. Like, that's a part of balance testing, which now goes into the equation of the things that we do. We have the story has been a huge one. The story is something that's worked on 40 hours a week and has been for the past 2 years. Talk about the story a little bit before we wrap this state of the game up, because I think that's the last thing I'd like to talk about is the story. Without going too, like, this is becoming information overload. Like, we've been at this for 4 years and I've never done a state of the game before. So I think before we get into information overload, what we do is we kind of pick a final point. And that's, I would like to talk about the story as the final point. So the story is something I've been working on for 2 years, and it's a fictional story that how the Chart Raiders universe exists. So imagine this is like you go into a bookstore, you pick up a book, like Star Wars, Dune, whatever. Pick your favorite fictional book. I have planned out 4 books so far in the series. So I first started this journey with a story book of Chart Raiders, this fictional story that supports the ecosystem. I started this 2 years ago, and it started as one book, and it started with storyboarding, character development, and throughout time it ended up having a second book, and then it ended up having a third book. And then it ended up having a future book and a prequel. So that was, 1, 2, 3, book 4 and 5. So actually there's 5 books planned. And the first one has taken 2 years to complete. To be fair, it's taken so long because you're kind of developing this spider webbing of a storyline across multiple iterations of the book. So you kind of have to make sure it makes sense from book number 1. So you almost have to design the story across 5 books just to make your first book. So that was a big thing. Probably took about 6 to 9 months of time, because you're talking about multiple books and the storylines and all this stuff. You're not fleshing out the entire details, but you're talking about like, you've made all the details, you understand why things happen. And this all has to be done to make sure book 1 makes sense. So right now, book 1 is just in its completion stages. We're just finishing up book 1, and it's taken 2 years, and it's about 200 pages, and it's a killer story. And it has graphics, and it has sound effects, and 200 pages of writing, not pictures. There's no pictures in that 200 pages. You add pictures, you're probably at like 300 pages, 350 pages. It has soundtracks for the story. It has a different more interactive medium that we're delivering this story mode through. So that's been really interesting. That's been really interesting to undertake that from a creative process. 2 years of writing. 2 years, pretty much full time. So that's been a heavy one as well. So I pretty much work 16 hours a day, and have been for years now. And I think that's a good point to wrap up State of the Game. I'm very excited to share the story. I'm very excited for people to start seeing Chart Raiders in its entirety. And I don't really feel like there's going to be an endpoint where I could end this video properly, because I could keep talking about things, but I think the story mode is good. And I'm very excited for the launch to come out. And very excited to do this first State of the Game update. And the next State of the Game, and another thing I didn't even mention is, what are our 2025 plans? Esports and putting this thing on Mac. Just going to drop that in there. The whole other conversation for a whole other State of the Game. But we've already begun development on both of those things. And so, it comes out on PC on November 5th, but Mac, next year, because we accounted for 2,100 hours of development to get it onto Mac operating properly, which is a high priority for us, by the way. So then PC first, Mac next year. But yeah, let's leave it at that. The story's coming out. Very excited about that. Very excited to share. And next State of the Game, we're going to focus on hopefully showing off Chart Raiders live for the first time. We're going to hopefully show off some footage and things of the sort of matches happening and things like that, and where you can actually do with this software. So that's going to be kind of cool. And thank you so much for tuning into the first State of the Game. Of course, if you haven't followed the Chart Raiders channel, follow it, Cotton Candy TA, myself and Chart Raiders as the founders. So that's the 2 channels that we operate on YouTube. And then of course, all of our social medias, the TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff. So make sure you're up to date there, following everything. And thank you for coming to State of the Game version 1 for Chart Raiders, or episode 1. And we'll see you on episode number 2. Cheers.